So that's how you can reform your leadership. Make it for people. This is for them. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 503. 5 movements in coffee that you must embrace. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I am your host for the show, and I'm really excited, of course, that you decided to join. If you're new to the show, welcome. We have a lot of episodes to choose from. You can most easily navigate the menu of options at this point, numbering over 900 episodes total over almost 8 years, by subscribing to Keys to the Shop. Because then, once you're subscribed, you'll be updated with new episodes, but you can also search within your podcast player for topics. You can do that on keystotheshop.com as well. And that's a great place to visit, also to learn more about Keys to the Shop consulting. But, subscribing to the show is a great way to do that as well. And all of our episodes are actually uploaded on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where we're uploading more video content, interviews and solo episodes, some live episodes, and then maybe some unique content for YouTube pretty soon here. So go to YouTube and subscribe there as well, at Keys to the Shop. Now, Keys to the Shop is not just this podcast, but I actually spend most of my time working one-on-one with my clients. These are coffee shop owners that are bringing myself in to their operations to help them level up and to grow to the next right level for their coffee shop. Or it's people who are just getting started and want to start off on the right foot. And so they bring me in to work one-on-one with them and their team to go through that process of opening their coffee shop. Wherever you find yourself, whether you're a veteran of the business and you just want some outside perspective to work with you and your team on refining your operations, your people, quality, and culture, or you are just new and want to have an advisor along the way to make the best decisions possible, you can email chris@keystotheshop.com to set up a free discovery call, and we're just going to have a conversation and see where you're at, how it can help, and what the next steps might be for working with Keys to the Shop Consulting. Again, that is at chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode, we have 2 sponsors. Of course, we're talking about Ground Control at groundcontrol.coffee, a revolutionary all-in-one brewer for the cafe. It is out of this world. It is a showpiece and it showcases coffee very well. Talk more about them later, as well as our friends at the Barista Series from Pacific at pacificfoodservice.com. Great plant-based beverages for your cafe. More on them later as well. But for right now, I want to dive right into our topic, which is 5 movements in coffee that you must embrace. You have to embrace these fully. And this is taken from a talk, a lecture that I used to give at Coffee Fest. If, by the way, you are interested in any keynote speaking or lectures in your trade show, at your conference, or if you're thinking, it'd be great if we can get our management team together and do some workshops, I do this a lot as well. So 5 movements in coffee that you have to fully embrace. Now, why do you have to fully embrace them? Well, it's conditional. If you want to give the best chance of success to your business, if you want to differentiate yourself, if you want to be profitable, if you want to be satisfied with the work that you're doing and also just be on the level of excellence that a lot of people right now are also trying to achieve and not be left behind in older ways, it's necessary that you embrace this because it is the expectation for a coffee shop now. And this, of course, is my opinion. And you know me, I don't really like trends in a sense. Like people are, think about like a product as a trend. My coffee shop has to have this thing. I don't care if it's bubble tea or matcha or energy drinks and Red Bull spritzers and whatever other things you can think of that are just like taking the industry, quote unquote, by storm. To me, storms, they bring a lot of chaos. Movements, though, they shift realities and they're gradual. They're like a groundswell of We've evolved to begin to need and want these things. The customer begins to say, no, this is like a baseline expectation. It's not a trend. It's not a fad, so to speak. It is more than that. It's what I'm going to call a movement. And there are 5 things that we need to be focused on in order to be successful in a coffee shop. And it doesn't matter whether or not you are a small shop or a large shop or have many shops or you're just a stand with drive-throughs. This stuff applies because no matter what, you're serving the public coffee. You are face-to-face with somebody who is expecting you to deliver an experience. And if you want to learn more about what the experience they're looking for looks like, one of our last episodes was talking about customer experience and how to design that. It is very important that we get the right priorities in line for delivering a great customer experience. But today I want to talk about 5 movements that you have to fully embrace. And we're going to start first with the first one, that may be the most important, and that is hospitality as a priority of focus. Hospitality. Quality is the best that it's ever been. In coffee, we make coffee very, very well, more than we did before. Before means like 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago. Every year, there's more information about how to fine-tune your water, your burrs, your understanding of flavor profiles, and we are dialing in so tightly to the most minute flavors in coffee. And all of that stuff is available to anyone, really. It really is. You can have quality coffee virtually anywhere in the world. And I remember a day, I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't the case. And there still are what we call coffee deserts, I suppose. But with specialty coffee, and maybe we'll just call this intentionally excellent coffee culture, you can find that a lot of places now. And so great. It's a great equalizer. Okay. The idea of making quality coffee is a pretty democratized process. And so what is going to differentiate you is how you treat people, and how you treat people as a company is the outworking of the personalities of all of your staff and yourself, plus the guiding principles and values of your business, worked out daily in the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys, ebbs and flows of business. How you do what you do and the why behind it and the spirit with which you deliver it. That is hospitality, and it makes all the difference because it is something nobody can compete with. You can't compete with your competitor that has an excellent hospitality culture because it's not just that they're doing things, it's who they are when they're doing it. You could take and copy and paste their exact same set of values, do all the same things, and it won't be exactly the same because each place has its own flavor of doing it. And you attract people and develop relationships and trust with them over time. That really creates loyalty. It creates a sense of, I want to come back again and again to be treated very well by these people, with this beverage being a conduit through which that delivery of intentional care and engaged communication happens. So there's a lot of ways you can look at hospitality. The 2 books that you should read on hospitality, of course, they're Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, and there is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. I also always recommend the original version of the book, Leadership and Self-Deception. And these are great ways to start to understand how it is we can serve others outside of ourselves, outside of the box of our own self-interest, to serve the interests of others through just what we do and how we do it. So that is why you need to be paying attention to it. And there are systems you can put in place that guarantee that your attention is going to be put on these areas to take a reading of how are we doing with how we're doing things. Who are we when we are at work, and is this really translating to a vibrant and energetic atmosphere that reflects those values in the daily work? That's how you can tell if your hospitality is actually working. You're going to have people reflecting it back to you in the form of reviews and comments and smiles, in increased trust in your business by bringing more people to you. But this is all supported by systems, not just of how to do the work and to make sure that we are honoring our promise, but it's also a scheduled observation and a tuning in and a meditating upon and absorbing the reality of your cafe. So that is a movement that we've seen a lot of because of books like Setting the Table and Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's popular now, especially today, to talk about we have to be focused on hospitality, hospitality, hospitality. So much so that we could almost start to use hospitality as a means to try to do the same stuff that it wasn't before, which was just service, the tools, the hacks. We always are kind of on this trajectory to create such a narrow view of a thing like hospitality that it starts to lose the life that it once had. Because before, hospitality was sort of the in-color, wide-open, effervescent version of what service, as a perfunctory, mechanistic doing of the thing over and over again, was. Now, because it is something we see as, oh, this is really important, we're like, how can I do this every single time? Well, we'll just treat it the same way we did service. And in some ways, you should have systems for hospitality. It's not antithetical to hospitality, but you have to be careful that you're not automating hospitality. Intentionality and presence is a huge part of this. And if you're not constantly sort of recentering yourself into what this is all about, you're going to fall prey to the same kind of thinking that got us in trouble when we thought hospitality was just the service and doing the thing. So keep it fresh, keep it intentional, move yourself and center yourself on this idea constantly so that you can make sure every day, every week, all year long, you are providing hospitality as a priority. So that's movement number one. Now, 2 is social identity and presence online. Now, this is a movement that, of course, Chris, yes, I have an Instagram account. Yes, we have funny reels that we have our baristas do where they throw whipped cream at each other's faces. We're totally present online. That's not what I'm talking about. That's fun. It's cool. It's in 10 years from now, we're going to think about those videos as the same version, just maybe, I don't know, maybe our collective nerves have been deadened so much over the last few years. It won't be as cringy, but like that Harlem Shake thing that happened in the early 2000s. I forget when that was. It was like 2010 or something. Oh, I mean, go back in those videos and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. It's kind of like the same thinking that we have when you are like, hey, we're engaged with our baristas. We give them a pizza party instead of providing the basics of job security and compensation and care through resourcing and communication. Doing all of this stuff online and following trends and things kind of gives you the illusion that you are present online and that your presence is kind of communicating something helpful about your identity. It's fun, but it's not necessarily what it's about. What it's about is actually taking values that you have already cultivated in your business and you know exactly what it means to work these out in the daily life of your business and reflect those also on your social media, to be on Instagram and other channels in a way that communicates an entry point into the culture that people will get to experience when they come to your store. Or it's a substitute for people who can't come to your store but still want to interact with the culture of your business and buy your product remotely. So they drink your coffee, they've got the bag on the counter, and they kind of like the communication of those values that were they in your shop, they probably would have seen that, but they can only see you on Instagram. And those posts and how you are communicating to people are important in aggregate. I see a lot of people who are very concerned about every single post needing to be a standalone piece. This isn't a museum. This is a conversation. It is an outworking of identity online, again, as a precursor and a primer for people to be in your store and to attract them to your store, and then to have a more enhanced version of that in person or as a way to extend what people are going to experience when they drink your coffee remotely. And so this is really important. It's important that it gets tied into those values, and that your presence online is not just built on trends that happen on TikTok or other channels. So it becomes this thing where it's a lot of noise and it doesn't contribute to anything meaningful. And I just said that you don't have to make every piece a museum piece. And so it seems like I'm saying the opposite. What I am saying is, don't just rely on doing big trends. Rely on being who you are as a business consistently, and maybe even vulnerably online. You can use great photography, engaging content, do it consistently, and stick with it. This is one of the biggest things that I see people fail in, is they underestimate the power of the extension of their brand online to create trust in their brand. I think it's a shame. Here's another thing to think about and how to embrace this beyond what I just talked about, which is with social identity and presence online, you've got to make sure that what you're promising people in photography and videos and values that you talk about and espouse in those posts are things that you are able to deliver on in the experience. That includes, by the way, if you're even in e-commerce, the experience that people have on your website and checking out and receiving your packaging, it all is a conversation. It's either going to be a conversation that you really want to get out of, or one that you wish could go on for another hour or so. It all depends on how well you've designed this thing. But having that presence online is a real asset, especially if you are willing to put in the work to deliver on people's expectations. So it's a movement that is easily seen as being accomplished if you just take part in funny trends and do the super base level posts about another day, another coffee, that kind of stuff. But if you take it seriously as a part of a relationship and a conversation, you're going to have great content and good quality content consistently, but it's going to be rooted in something that feeds more areas of the business's success and actually serves to fortify the whole business. So it's a little bit more holistic. So that's the second thing I wanted to talk about. Now, third thing, another movement that you need to be paying attention to in coffee, and not only pay attention to, but embrace this, is accessibility of product in the industry, like how we go about creating accessible products. And that first has to put us into this mindset of what is inaccessible. Well, there's a few ways that things can be inaccessible psychologically and physically and financially. So let's start first with the psychological, which for a lot of us, I'm going to be honest, I think this might be the biggest one. People spend a lot of money on all sorts of stuff that some of us might consider frivolous because it's not important to us. So I want to start with this idea of psychological because it has to do with the way we value something or how confident we are to even dip our toe into it. We are very good in coffee about building walls through our words, unintentionally and sometimes intentionally. The snobbery of the past might be the past, but the echoes of that snobbery are ever present in the industry, and dismantling it, similar to old systems of trade in coffee built on colonial structures, is necessary to innovate new structures of trade for shifting power to farmers and things like that. There is a lot of the same thing that needs to be done in the way that we talk about coffee to the customer. That is not a way of basically making ourselves feel super important. Out of our own insecurity, we need to puff ourselves up. We need to engage in all this hubris with, well, you wouldn't know because I'm a coffee expert and I use all these fancy words to describe the most, it's coffee. And oh, you just taste coffee in this coffee? I taste jasmine and persimmon and all this stuff doesn't really serve to make it accessible to people because we're not meeting people where they are. We're not celebrating people's small steps and understandings of coffee as the seeds that will grow into something great that they are. That's one thing that we do in coffee is we despise these small beginnings, to use a biblical kind of phrase. Don't despise small beginnings. The small beginning is somebody who is actually at the cupping tasting coffee that you did, like a public cupping, or they actually ask you a question about a bag of coffee. I don't care if they squeezed the life out of that bag to sniff it through their left nostril before they came up. You could have that little twinge in you that is like, that's so what a customer does, and they messed up my retail bag. But guess what? They're very interested in coffee. Now, if you can't see the beauty in that, then you have an accessibility problem. If you can't train yourself and your staff to see these small beginnings as potentials that are needing to be cultivated, the same way a coffee farmer takes a seedling and cultivates it. Wait, it takes like 4 years for a coffee to produce fruit. Why don't you think the same way about customers? Okay, so jumping off the high horse a little bit here, because I've engaged in this stuff too, because I too have gone through that journey of insecurity to say, choosing coffee, was that the right career choice for me? Well, maybe if I make myself feel good by making other people seem worse, I could actually be better. No, I wasn't actually thinking that, but I think there's a lot of this therapeutic, cathartic gymnastics that we go through. And it comes out in esoteric descriptions of coffee. And sometimes it comes out in the menu that we create for customers that doesn't have anything that they're used to in it. So we're just like, you know what? It's all going to be like enamel splitting, acidic coffee all along the board because I love that coffee and I can't get enough of it. And it's like going to a candy store and the only thing that they have is sour candies. Well, where's the chocolate? Where's the gummy bears and all this other stuff? Maybe this is not a great analogy, but people do expect a little bit of variety to choose from. And if you're wise, you are going to give them somewhere to go. And the menu needs to be a place, the roasted coffee menu needs to be something that gives people entry points. Now, you, as a weirdo coffee professional, might have weirdo coffee professional tastes. That can be represented on the menu, but don't ever assume that that's graduate level. Maybe you're stuck in some lower level of having to have the most mind-altering flavors, and you're assuming that everyone else who loves really chocolatey coffees is just like, well, we like to give the people what they want. Okay, well, there's the weird thing to say about your customers that, frankly, most coffee shops need to survive. It's the vanilla lattes, the medium to dark roasted bean purchasers, the people who buy that earthy Indonesian and order an extra shot in their caramel latte. And we think to ourselves, almost in a pitying way, oh, eventually they're going to wake up and see the light. And when they do what? What'll that do? What's the difference? What's the difference? If you're charging the right price for your coffee to make a profit, and you're buying good coffee that's not cheap coffee that's exploitative in the sense that the farmer is not being completely jerked around by the purchase of it, the difference is nothing, really. The difference is you might be a little bit more pleased with yourself. So think about that. That's inaccessible. And it comes out in the tone, it comes out in the culture. So if we celebrate people and people's love for coffee, and we walk with them through that and allow them to develop, or to just say that they're going to stay in a place, we're not going to force them into a mold. We're just going to offer them what we have. We're going to make some options available for them, knowing that everybody is going to want something a little bit different, but it doesn't mean we have to have everything everyone wants. But we're going to create a menu that is a little bit more accessible, and it could be financially accessible too. Some coffees don't always have to be very, very expensive. Not every coffee you buy green is going to be $12 a pound green. Some of them are going to be $5 or $6. And you can charge enough money to, again, make a profit to run your business. And you can also be a responsible purchaser of green coffee to know that that coffee is purchased in a way that will help the farmer more than it will hurt. So the point here is we can have a accessible way of describing coffee and talking about coffee. We can have an accessible price range in our coffee offerings. And then we physically can offer our customers a accessible product. We can grind it for them. If you say, no, we never grind coffee for customers, I'm sorry, but that is the most archaic way of thinking. You grind the coffee for the customer. Some people, they have, their product put into an instant coffee product. And I will tell you, I use some of these instant products myself when I'm traveling. Coffee is a pretty accessible product, okay? Coffee is accessible almost more than any other product I can think of. Buy the bag of coffee. Most people will have a blade grinder of some kind, and if not, they get it pre-ground, and then they get a Mr. Coffee machine, and then they make the coffee. Leave them alone. They're fine. If they love it, and they're buying your coffee, congrats. It's that simple. And so physically speaking, having the product accessible is really important. And also, by the way, distributing your coffee out to grocery stores or in certain locations of the city, that physically creates more accessibility. Also, hey everyone, it's Chris, and we'll be right back to our episode, but I wanted to give you a little bit more information about our sponsors today, starting with the great folks over at Ground Control. GroundControl.coffee is where you can learn more about the brewer that has been revolutionizing batch brew coffee, as well as creating espresso and cold brew concentrates that will help you make batched iced lattes, batched cold brew. Their original Cyclops brewer has been a worldwide hit, and now the new brewer is less expensive and also boasts a 30% higher output of those concentrates, and it's actually smaller, so it fits in more places in your cafe. It's a great all-in-one brewer that will increase your cafe's efficiency, really be a showpiece, and elevate quality with the SCA award-winning technology. So if you want to really stand out and you're interested to learn more about the Ground Control brewer, check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. Now I want to talk to you about the Barista series, the OGs, the originals of plant-based beverages. Coffee shops have been using them for decades. They have been advocates for the specialty coffee community since the beginning. Their extensive lineup of plant-based performance beverages stand up to the heat from steaming. They produce amazing texture for latte art, and also the taste balance is keeping everything focused on the coffee. The coffee is the star. And these three things are wonderful for providing your customers with a great plant-based beverage experience. So check them out at pacificfoodservice.com. Get samples, try it for yourself, and see what you think. I think you're going to be very impressed by the Barista series. I love the folks over there. They're doing great work, both in their product and in the way they support the specialty coffee community. And yeah, if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers, check out the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, now back to our episode on the 5 movements of coffee shops that you should be embracing. Now, I want to move on to number 4, which is customer success. It's related to this last one. Customer success is about not education, but equipping. If your customer is engaged with your product and they want to learn more and they're like, I wonder if I can get my coffee to taste like the coffee shops. I wonder if I can make really great coffee at home. I kind of want to make better coffee. That's a buy-in moment. They have just told you that they are opening themselves up to your input to how they do a very personal daily ritual. And now you have the responsibility to enter into that conversation with equipment recommendations, brewing recommendations, and making your customer successful with your coffee. And success looks like them getting a consistent cup of coffee that they like for their very personal ritual that they have at home. That's the focus that we need to have here. When we don't focus on the customer and we pretend as though, for instance, like the tasting notes on the bags are all built from cupping and not from brewing, we're making a big, big mistake, because customers will never taste those things, or hardly ever, because we're not doing this empathetically. We're just doing it internally, and it's our language, but we're not translating it to what they're experiencing. We're not brewing our coffee with the same water they're using. We're not brewing our coffee with the same equipment that they're using. And if you want to study something, you should study how your customers consume your coffee and optimize the way that you equip them for that method, and potentially offer another method to them that is not going to break the bank. There's a lot of great little brewers you can offer. There's pour over setups that you can offer. Keep it minimal and accessible, and equip them with the success to use those things or to just use what they have successfully. They're going to come back and buy more coffee. They're going to buy beans, and that's going to be a high profit margin item for you. If you don't roast, they're going to come back, buy beans, but they're also going to buy coffee from you. You're the one who gave them this key to unlock more flavor and more enjoyment from a thing that for a lot of us is like the bright spot in our day before things get started. It's a sacred moment, just as much as it is when you come into a coffee bar and you open yourself up to the experience that we are kind of promising you're going to get. That's a sacred moment too. It's why people get so pissed off when they experience bad coffee or bad hospitality or bad service. It's because they've trusted, and like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown, it just is this cycle. So customer success with your coffee and in your coffee shop, it's very, very important. It's one of those things that I think it's not education just for educating. It's not telling the customer, you need to know about these 5 really, out there processing methods that are experimental things. For the most part, that stuff, maybe you can teach that in some class that people sign up for, but the first level is let's make people fall in love with this coffee. And we will be the people that serve you to bring success your way so that your enjoyment is enhanced. And that means we have to study them and what they're using, how they're brewing, and then create more success, right? And then walk alongside them in that. So now the last one of these 5 movements that I think you should be focused on is, I think, leadership reform. Reforming the way we think about leadership in the cafe. Now, reforming leadership is basically walking away from the idea of positional authority only and walking into the idea of earning trust through great decisions over time. You do have positional authority. It is okay to be the boss. You start that way, but you can't stay there. For a lot of you, this is your first go at leading a group of young people. Primarily, this is who you're going to be employing. And it is intimidating. And it is going to be a journey of self-discovery right alongside everyone else. Even though you might be middle-aged or, you think you've got all of it figured out and got wisdom and all that, when you enter into something like this, you have to be a student of the process and reform the way that you look at your position in coffee as the owner or the manager to take the shape of the chief servant. You still are going to have to hire and fire and discipline and make decisions and reward and guide and coach. All of these things are part of the deal. So it's not like when I say the leader or the owner is the chief servant, it's just like you're always going to acquiesce to whatever the group wants. You still have to make some tough decisions here, right? But the mindset you bring to it is not lording it over people. It's not a reaction, like a harsh reaction towards something. I'm going to totally lead you. Watch this. It's more like a stewardship of possibilities that lands in your lap and is a responsibility. The authority is for other people. It's for their benefit. And you now have been given this responsibility by, opening this coffee shop to make these decisions that will affect other people's lives, because people do spend a lot of time working in coffee shops, as somebody who I don't even really care to think about, what kind of chunk of my life has been spent opening and closing and stocking and cleaning and all that stuff. The quality of what happens in those hours during the day is determined by the decisions made by people who have the authority to shape it and to shape people. And as I'll talk about a little bit in a shift break later this week, it is about developing yourself also as a leader and being willing to change. So there's that shift. It's similar to the 6 Truths About Power episode you'll find linked in the show notes here. I would encourage you to listen to that for some philosophy on how to view power that you have in the CAF. Power is not a bad thing. It is a tool, just like anything else. So the other part of this is an extension of what you do with that power, and that is that leadership has to be good at leading, not just good at coffee, not just good at, sticking around for a very long time. The fact that you've been around for a long time may be a consequence of you being a good leader and a great fit for a leadership position. But as our friend Bruce Tulgan says, low performers love to hang out. There's a lot of people working in a coffee bar who are terrible at customer service, and they just don't pull their weight on the bar, and everyone has to catch up for them. They're constantly late, but no one's doing anything about it, and they've been there for years. Now, just because they have seniority, that's not a good reason to make them a manager or a trainer. I've been here for years and I deserve, you sticking around is just a consequence of physics. That's about it. So the leadership that we have in the cafe has to be based on better reasons than sheer time spent or skills in the craft of coffee itself. It has to be based on skills in leadership and leadership potential. So we have to study. What does it look like to be a good leader here? What does it look like to teach? You can be great at espresso and latte art. And to be a trainer, I think you should be good at those things. But lots of people are very, very good at doing the work, but not great at teaching it. It took me a little bit. I was kind of thrown into a training role, and I loved the idea of it early in my career. But as a competition barista, I stepped on a lot of toes because I was just only dedicated to the precision and high standards that were void of really care for the individual. And I learned a lot in those days about what a trainer actually does, and that it wasn't just about my way or the highway, because I was, in my mind, I cared so deeply about the coffee. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to be critical to the nth degree so that at the end of the day, we're all going to be super, the highest end coffee possible. And this was all in the early 2000s. And it was not great because it didn't have a lot of empathy in it. But eventually I learned that this is something you need in teaching. And had I the presence of mind at the time or the resources to train me in training, it would have been great to learn about teaching styles and learning styles and empathy and how to have a bigger picture view of training than just compliance to standards. No matter how well-meaning you are, you could enter into this relationship with your staff as a trainer, manager, or leader, and it will be interpreted as something that you never intended it to be interpreted as. I give this talk on creating culture at Coffee Fest, and I talk about how, I would pat my son on the head, or I did pat my son on the head once when he was very little, and his response was to say, ouch. And I had no idea why he would say ouch until a second or two later, I realized I had a wedding ring on, and that wedding ring is just a part of me. It's just the weight of it. I don't feel the weight of it. It's just on my hand all day long. And so I reached out to show affection. And his interpretation was pain. And how can I expect him to know otherwise? He just experienced what he experienced. You as the leader, as the owner, as the trainer, you could mean well, but the weight of your authority and the pressure of the situation and how stressful it is sometimes, especially for new baristas, to be in this environment, your intentions will be overwhelmed by the interpretation if you don't consider the weight of your presence and authority. So that's how you can reform your leadership. Make it for people. This is for them. Let's serve them with our authority and our power, and be open to criticism as it comes, because it's probably reflecting some aspect of your leadership that needs to be dialed in just as much as the bad aftertaste of a coffee can be a signal that you need to fine up the grind. You need to change the dose. Maybe something happened in the roasting. These are signals that we pay attention to. And if we're not being just as detailed about tuning in and dialing in those things as we are about coffee, then we're missing the point. And so that's the fifth area to embrace, something I do see happening in coffee, and I want to see more of it. And so I would encourage you to embrace that in yourself and in your shop for the sake of your team and your customers and your business. So that's it for today, everybody. I wanted to share this with you, and I hope that it was helpful. Let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, you can always email chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, I want to draw your attention to something that I think is really cool, and that is to one of our sponsors here, and that's Arto Brick. At Arto Brick on Instagram, they can satisfy all of your hard surface design needs from brick to tile and stone. They design and manufacture and curate unique hard surfaces for one-of-a-kind places, like that coffee shop you own. And I tell you, if you go to arto.com, you'll see some amazing examples of the work they do. They're based in LA, and I've so enjoyed looking at their work and following them on Instagram. DM them on Instagram and mention that you heard about them here on the show at Keys to the Shop. Say Chris sent you. They are huge fans of coffee shops, and I met one of the owners, Armin, at Los Angeles Coffee Fest, and I know Armin is so excited to have you all hear about this product. So if you're looking for some amazing tile work and stone work for your coffee shop, you need to go and reach out, have a conversation with them, DM them on Instagram at Arto Brick, and I think you're really going to be impressed, and let them help you make your space truly unique. So that is it for us today, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. As always, subscribe to the show, share it with your friends and followers on social media. That does a lot to help the show. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.